Pogo jumps for injured runners. How on earth is doing pogo jumps going to help us recover from our running injury? Okay, now bear with me here because pogo jumps can be a very important part of injury recovery if the injury that you have is very limiting, meaning that you struggle to run at all. If you try and run for 30 seconds and get red light pain, then we're going to use pogo jumps to help us increase the tolerance of the injured area, whether it's your knee or your Achilles or whatever, in order to be able to then use running as the rehab. So they are a very important part, but they are not always necessary. Most of the time, we can just go on to running and using running as the rehab, but sometimes we can't. Sometimes the pain and the pathology is too bad. And that's where pogos can be really helpful. So today we're going to go through like what they are, why we use them, and then specifically how we use them. So what they are, pogo jumps is just when you're bouncing on the spot as if you're skipping rope or something like that. So specifically, we don't want to be hopping, right? So pogo hops is when you're on one foot and you're bouncing. Pogo jumps is when you're on 2 feet and you're bouncing. And imagine you were skipping rope, it's the same kind of thing. And then you just count the amount of reps that you do. So if you do 5 pogo jumps, right? You might do 3 sets of 5, right? So you bounce 5 times, you take a rest, you bounce 5 times, you take a rest. You might do 3 sets of 10, you might do 3 sets of 20, you might do 5 sets of 30, right? Any kind of combination, but you're counting how many you're doing in reps and sets, and you're bouncing on the spot with your legs kind of straight. And it's not like a jump. You're not jumping really high. It's more of a bounce. And we're going to add these into walks. So the way we use them with our runners, if they are injured to the degree that they can't do run walks, so they can't even run for like 30 seconds without red light pain, then we can use walk plus pogo. So what we do is we'll schedule a 30-minute walk and we'll insert a certain amount of pogo jumps into it. It might be 3 sets of 10, it might be 3 sets of 20, it might be 6 sets of 30, right? It depends on where the runner is at and what we're trying to do in terms of like how much stress we want to put on the injured area. But we're going to have that 30-minute walk, and we're going to do that at a set interval. So sometimes we'll do it like really frequently, like once or even twice a day, 30-minute walks with these pogo jumps like embedded into the middle of it. The other way that we might do it is pogo jumps with walks like 4 times a week. So you have 30-minute walk 4 times a week with the pogo jumps, 3 sets of 20 inside, or 3 sets of 30, or 5 sets of 30, whatever it might be. And at this stage, we're looking at exposing the injured area to a certain amount of mechanical stress, particularly impact or plyometric stress, and using that to desensitize the area. And the reason this is important, as opposed to just walking or just resting, is that when we are walking, we are putting a very small mechanical stress on the body. Because we walk around all day, the body was pretty much okay with general activities of daily living. The trouble is when we start running, we immediately get red light pain if the injury is bad enough, okay? So then if we just continue walking around and continue our daily life and just rest from running for a couple of weeks, we don't get any exposure to that plyometric stimulus. But if we try and run on it, we immediately get red light pain. Now we're irritating the area. We're not desensitizing it. We're just irritating it. So we need something in between. This is where the pogo jumps comes in. And we can titrate the dose very precisely. So it gives us an interim step between rest and walking and running. So we do the walks with the pogos in them to desensitize the injured area and get it used to that plyometric stimulus that we get when we run, in order that we can then run. And then when we can do run walks in a way that doesn't provoke red light pain, then we can use the run walks as the rehabilitation, as the recovery strategy, as the stimulus for that mechanical dose. And this is important because when we have an injured area, let's say we have knee pain, and the knee pain is quite bad and has been bad for a while, and it's so bad that we can't run, not even for 30 seconds. So we can't do run walks, and we can't use running as the rehab in that way, which we have talked about many times. How do we get the body to that place where we can use running as the rehab? So we use the pogo jumps to apply that mechanical stimulus, the plyometric stimulus. And what we're doing here is not so much building like structural resilience or creating any kind of structural change to the knee with these, 3 sets of 10 pogo jumps or 3 sets of 20 pogo jumps. What we're doing is desensitizing it. So if we have pain, if the pain is really bad, then it's usually a larger percentage of nervous system sensitivity and a lower percentage of structural degeneration or damage. If the pain is not that bad, so let's say you can run 15 miles and then you get a bit of an achy knee towards the end, the percentage of that pain experience is more structural and a little bit less sensitivity. So anytime we experience pain, there's a certain amount of it that's kind of more structural and a certain amount of it that's more neurological or more sensitivity based. And it's always both. It doesn't matter how severe or how mild the injury it is. It doesn't matter how long it's been going on. It doesn't matter if you think it's all in your head or if you think it's entirely structural. It's always both. But when we have pain that's so bad that we can't even run 30 seconds, it's likely that the majority of the pain that we're feeling is coming from sensitivity. And this is why rest is such a problem. This is why it's such a problem when a health professional or a doctor or another PT tells you to just take 2 weeks off, or just take a month off, or just wait 2-3 months, which often runners will do before trying to get into running, because they don't want to damage it. They don't want to make it worse. The problem is that's making it worse because the area is not exposed to any kind of stimulus that will desensitize it. And that's where the pogos come in. So we use the pogos to desensitize the knee, the ankle, the Achilles, the shin, whatever it is. We just apply this very small dose of plyometric stimulus, right? That's a bouncing stimulus. So it's not walking. It's not really jumping either, right? And it's not running. It's kind of lower than those, but higher than walking. And then we just increase the amount, right? So we go from 3 sets of 10 to 4 sets of 10 to 5 sets of 10 to 3 sets of 20, and so on and so forth. And we just build it up until the runner can tolerate 30 seconds of running without getting red light pain. Once they reach that stage, now we can use running as the rehab. So we start run walking, where we'll run for 30 seconds, walk for a minute, repeat times 3 or repeat times 6. And now we can use the running as that stimulus to desensitize the area. As we get better and we're moving up our recovery steps, we can start to move out of the walking and pogos and move on to run walking. And then as we're developing tolerance and desensitizing the area, we can start to move on to continuous running. And then as we move on to continuous running, where we're running slow in zone 1 and zone 2, and we develop a tolerance for that, then we can move on to slightly faster running in zone 3. Now we're doing less work on building out volume and more work on running faster. And then once we develop a tolerance to that, we can start running faster in zone 4. And then eventually, when we develop a tolerance for that, we can start running faster and graded exposure to running fast and sprinting in zone 5. So if we refer back to our recovery steps, walks and pogos are kind of step 0, right? It's where you can't even do run walks. You can't use running as the rehab in any way because you can't tolerate any running. So this tends to be something we'll do with people with quite a nasty pathology or a nasty injury or a pain that's quite severe, right? You imagine you can't run for 30 seconds without red light pain. That's a pretty bad situation to be in. We don't do nothing. We don't rest, okay? We start with walks and pogos. And because these are quite a mild stimulus, we can do them quite frequently. So we'll often get our runners to do them every day, walk for 30 minutes and do these pogo jumps, and then we'll titrate the amount of pogo jumps. And we might get them to do it twice a day even, depending on how long we think we're going to be on this step 0, this bottom step. And then we'll just get them onto the run walk step as soon as they're ready. As soon as they can do 30 seconds of running without red light pain, we're moving on to step 1. Okay, now we're on to run walking, and then we just build up from there in the normal way. Right, so this is just the foundational step that we have to do sometimes if we can't tolerate any running. And it's not the sexiest, and it's not the most exciting form of rehabilitation or the most exciting step along the recovery steps. However, it is important and it is necessary, and it does often work. So a lot of runners who come to us will have tried lots of other forms of treatment. And the problem was that every time they tried to run on it, they were just irritating it too much. They were getting red light pain. They didn't have it anywhere to bridge the gap between complete rest and just walking and actually being able to run a little bit, because then you can start to use running as that adaptive stimulus to desensitize the areas, to start to build the structural resilience. And then you have a stable foundation to build up on. So if that sounds like you, then there is hope, right? Get out of this step. Try the pogo jumps frequently every day, 3 sets of 10 start with a 30-minute walk, right? And then try and build it up. And if you've been trying that, or you've been struggling with rehab and trying to get over a running injury that's more severe for quite some time, we have helped runners who have not run in years with severe pain, completely unable to run even 30 seconds, get back to actually running, often quite a lot, right? It takes, a few months, but we can build them up if they're doing the right strength training, if they've got the right biomechanics, which we work on during the running, and they've got a structured and strategic approach to use running as the rehabilitation, starting potentially with a pogo jump, if that's where we've got to be, then, we can help you with that, right? It's not sexy, it's not particularly exciting, but it works. So if you would like some help with that, as always, click the link in the description and book a call. We'll have a free evaluation call, we describe it as, and what we're trying to do is just get a sense of what's the main limiting factor for you, where do we start, what have you tried, and can we help you? And then we'll look at that and hopefully be able to get you back running and not having to do pogo jumps for too long. Okay.